With the economy hard hit by the global financial turmoil, seeking employment has become the major concern of some 20,000 fresh graduates who are joining the labor force this year. The OUHK School of Business and Administration of the Open University of Hong Kong joined hands with the Advisory Committee on Human Resources Development in the Financial Services Sector, the FinMen Committee, to organize a forum on 31st March 2009. The forum, Hong Kong in the Global Financial Crisis, Human Resources Implications for the Financial Industry, provided a platform for business professionals and academics to exchange ideas on ways to cope with the future challenges and opportunities brought on by the global financial crisis, thus enabling students to acquire more market information and equipping them for a career in the financial industries. The panel discussion was hosted by FinMen Committee Chairman Mr. Ignatius Chan. The panelists included Mr. Chris Chan of J.P. Morgan Chase Bank, Professor Stephen Cheung of the Hong Kong Baptist University, Mr. David Loy of Schroeder Investment Management Hong Kong Limited, Mr. Alvin Mak of Citibank, and Mr. Andrew Choi of Korn Ferry International Hong Kong Limited.
First of all, let me welcome all of you to the forum today, which I hope will deliver a relevant topic to all of you, students in business, particularly those who are graduating and entering the job market this coming summer. Before I start, I like to thank the OpenU, in particular my good friend Professor John Leung, for making available this excellent facility for us to use as the venue for today's forum. I'm extremely pleased to see a great turnout. I know this hall can sit more than 300 people, 350 people, and based on my eye count, I think we have well over 200 people today. Now, a lot of people, in fact, warned me when I brought up this topic, the theme of today's panel with them. They say, hey, TC, do you know that you would be conducting perhaps one of the most depressing and most gloomy forums that anybody has ever done. Now, be that as it may, I think this topic is extremely relevant and also extremely interesting. We live in very challenging times. A lot of people think that we go through a crisis that has not been seen in our generation or even the previous generation. A lot of people likened the current crisis to what happened during the Great Depression in the United States before the Second World War. I tend to agree because in my 30 years experience in this particular field, I certainly have not seen anything like this. By the way, collectively, among all the panelists here today, I think we have close to 200 years of collective experience. And later on, as you listen to them, you will find out whether they have seen anything that resembles what we are going through today. Now let's get down to business. The format is I will be the moderator. I'm the chair. Extremely honored to do that. But instead of asking each of the panelists to give a speech, I will ask questions. I will ask a question, and all of them will have the chance to respond to my question. Now let me just follow through on that logic which I just stated. This is extremely challenging period. A lot of people can't see the end of the tunnel. Right? Certainly, we haven't seen the light of the tunnel yet. But before we get into this very serious question, how has the employment market been affected by the crisis? Let me ask a more basic, a more fundamental question. How has the current crisis or the current financial tsunami affected the world, affected the industry? In particular, I want to know what are the industries within the financial sector. As we all know, we have insurance, investment banking, commercial banking, asset management, you name it. Which are the particular industries, particular products and services that have been hit the hardest? And how has the world changed in general? How has the economic well-being of people changed? How have people's mindsets changed as a result of this crisis? Let me go from Chris to Andrew. Chris, your turn.
I think the main change is we're now in a deleveraging world. Right? In the last 5 years, knowingly or unknowingly, I think the world has leveraged itself up, to a level that created a lot of the prosperity that I think we've seen. I think I'm not trying to blame any particular one Greenspan, or Citibank, or whoever, right? I think this is a 100-year event. I think we've seen was because it's a combination of a lot of factors. I think most importantly, I think was the low interest rate environment. And a very low inflation environment, but we do have very strong growth in global economies, right? That was unprecedented, because I think usually when there is high growth, central banks will raise interest rates and to cool down economy. In the last 5 years, we had this dream-like scenario where we have very high growth, but very low inflation. I think that was, created by one, in the early 80s, Paul Volcker really killed inflation expectation once and for all. And we had 20 years of inflation, and thus, inflation expectation, interest rates comes down to, this kind of level. And secondly, you had the releasing of all the communist countries' cheap labor force coming to the global market to provide cheap goods, right? And thirdly, I think you have in particular China, right? In the last few years, we're all bragging about how cheap you can buy a DVD player, right? And those are things happen only once 100 years, and I think that combination of that, created this low interest rate environment. And, I think people are born as greedy people, right? So, you have investors say, hey, yields are too low and we want to have higher yields, right? And on the other hand, you have bankers say, hey, we can provide all these nice products for you to get higher yields, but there's no free lunch, as we learn in economics, and high yield means higher risk, and people didn't get that point.
Thanks, Chris. I think the most important take, from what you said in the last 2 minutes was the world has built up a lot of excesses in spending, in investment because of low interest rates, loose credit, right, and the emergence of China. And then, in the near future at least, we will go through a period of deleveraging. That's the key word, right? Deleveraging, by the way, will mean shrinkage, right? Shrinkage in spending, in economic growth, which will affect all of us. So hard times ahead.